Hello and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Crystal Hines. Crystal is a therapist for therapists. She is an EMDR consultant, an IFS certified therapist and clinical consultant. She's gone through the IFS Institute and received her level 2 training. And this is all about how she's an absolute expert in this field. She specializes in this field and she trains people in these modalities. And so I really love the depth of her knowledge in this topic. I think IFS is such a beautiful system. It's really gentle, it's client led. And we talk about some lesser known things in the IFS system about how it has a spiritual component. And we talk about the legacy burden and also about epigenetics. So we really deep dive into this topic. There's so much juicy information in here, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, take a moment to give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. So much gratitude if you leave a comment or a review. And I'm going to hop on in with my episode with Crystal. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Crystal. Good morning and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast.
Hey, Nicky, good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited actually about our topic today. And I am so excited to find you because today we're going to talk about internal family systems. And what I love about what you're doing is that you're a therapist that works with therapists. And also, you've done your level 2 IFS training through the IFS Institute, and you have your EMDR background, and you kind of fuse those together. And I know that you're skilled in these both because you're an EMDR consultant and an IFS certified clinical consultant. So I'm super excited about your level of expertise. I'm really excited about how you mix those two modalities. And I feel like everybody's talking about IFS. It seems like it's like the new buzzy thing, but it's not a new system. And not a lot of people, I would say, including myself, I understand pieces of it, but I don't think that people have a good grasp of the system. And so before we kind of like completely dive deep into the system, I'm really curious about how you found your way into the system and why it resonated with you and why it's led you to a path of working with others with these modalities.
Thanks so much, Nikki. I just love any opportunity to talk about IFS and EMDR and any of this stuff. So I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, so for me, I pay a lot of attention to my own lived experience as a client and as a human. It really informs who I am as a person and who I am as a therapist. So I found IFS in my work as a client when I was doing EMDR. So I'm a complex trauma survivor, and I used to believe that I would have to be in therapy for the rest of my life because of all the stuff that I've been through. And then I discovered EMDR and found a really wonderful EMDR therapist years ago. And we worked through some trauma memories, and then we dropped into some like deeper attachment stuff. And it was in that work, really working with some young experiences that I had, where I discovered my own little parts. And I was like, what the hell is this? I had my skeptical parts. I had all kinds of things come up when I like met these little parts inside of me. And then I was obsessed. I was like, what is this? How can I learn more? And then learned a little bit about parts work through EMDR, actually, because I had been trained in EMDR as well, and did some ego states work, which is out of the theory of structural dissociation. And the language of that just didn't resonate with me as much as the IFS theory. So I found out that IFS was a thing and did a deep dive into IFS. Really, that was in like 2016-ish when I started that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so for people that have no knowledge about what IFS is, I'm wondering if you could break it down in really simple, easy to digest terms about where the system came from, how it evolved, and what is unique to IFS.
Yeah, so internal family systems was created by Richard Schwartz, really in the 90s, I think. I see it as he trusted his own intuition and curiosity around like what his clients were reporting to him about parts of self, and created this whole therapeutic modality that essentially is that we have protective parts of us that develop, um, kind of as we grow, as we like begin in the world to function in the world. We have parts of us that develop, to help us do and be in the world, and they're organized, in a way to protect us from feeling shame, feeling hurt, feeling vulnerable. I like to say a lot, even if we like hypothetically existed in a world where we didn't have any adverse traumas or adverse experiences and nothing bad ever happened, which just isn't possible, right? But if that were true,
Mm-hmm.
we would still have parts of us that develop to actually just help us function in our day-to-day life. So we have these parts that are like doers,
Mm-hmm.
um, and like parts that help me to like wake up and get started in my day and actually come on and be interviewed for a podcast. These are parts of me that do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have self energy, which is this essence, this, core essence, this being, this kind of true self, this core self of who we all are, and we all share this energy. And in IFS, they call it self energy with a capital S, self, you'll see written a lot. And this is a state of like open heartedness, of feelings of wonder, of awe, of curiosity, of compassion, connection, when we feel like in community with others. So it's like a state of being, and parts are more of like a state of doing.
Mm-hmm.
And as we experience things in life where we felt less than or not good enough or hurt by caregivers or people in our communities, or all the different things that can happen, these parts develop to protect our self energy from being hurt again like that. And through that protection, it can block our access to self energy. So then we have, parts of us that can take over, like an inner critic or a perfectionist, or an imposter syndrome part, or I'm going to be, you know, better than everyone else around me at this thing, like whatever it is that parts take on to keep us from feeling that like vulnerability of, the hurt that they felt. And so I'll pause there.
Are those the ones that are managers that you're talking about?
Yeah, so in IFS, they do use language, to describe the different parts. And so I I don't love the labels because parts are so much more than these labels,
Mm-hmm.
but it is described as, so there's the protective system and then the kind of the young vulnerable parts. The protective system are, um, managers and firefighters. And
Mm-hmm.
so managers are really proactive parts of self that are typically really socially acceptable. They do everything that they can in advance to keep
Mm-hmm.
us from feeling like shame or pain or vulnerability. So those are like the perfectionist, the inner critic, the worrier, the, control freak, the,
Mm-hmm. The
really
people
proactive.
pleaser.
Yes, people pleasers,
Yeah.
totally. And then we have the firefighters, and they are reactive. So these are the parts that come in and like shut everything down. So
Mm-hmm.
this is these managers did their best, but oh, I'm flooded with shame right now. Something happened to make me feel these big feelings. all this pain and shame is coming up. So these firefighters come in and shut it down. And these are like dissociation, self-harm, addictions, any kind of thing that just like numbs and shuts down and disconnects, like put out the fire, so to speak.
Yeah.
And these parts, as you can imagine, are not as socially acceptable. And often our own managers and managers of others try to keep those behaviors at bay. What I love about IFS is such a compassionate way to be with some of that and understand, like, if that is coming up, it's because it's trying to protect us in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of it's trying to protect us, and some of it comes out as dysfunction that's socially acceptable, like the people
Right.
pleasing, and then some of it
Exactly.
comes out as dysfunction, as in rage and alcoholism, that's not socially acceptable. But at the end of the day, they're all parts that are trying to protect this like inner self from being wounded further or hurting or feeling
Mhm.
shame. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those parts in IFS are called exiles.
Hmm.
Um, and again, parts of me really don't like the names of these, but exiles are typically the young, vulnerable parts that are really carrying the pain of the different experiences. And so these parts are feeling things like worthlessness, unlovable, not belonging, shame, guilt,
Hmm.
embarrassment, like really all of the pain and yuck
Yeah.
from different experiences that we have. It's like these parts are feeling it. They were the ones that are wounded and sometimes stuck back in those trauma memories.
Hmm.
Um, and so these protective parts, it makes sense. Try to keep all that like at bay. We don't want to feel that.
Hmm.
Um, and so when those feelings get flooded, that's when these parts get activated. And the whole idea with IFS is to actually help our parts feel our presence. And so it's all about the like inner relationship of our self energy with
Hmm.
these parts. So ultimately helping these parts to know that we are here now. Like we were little back then and these parts had to develop to keep us safe, but we're
Hmm.
here. We're here and we can be with them. It's like an inner caregiver or inner secure attachment figure, like that reparenting type of work,
Yeah.
but inside of ourselves, um, which is so incredibly healing.
Yeah, I'm curious. I kind of want to reframe this in the way that makes sense to my brain and see if I've digested what you're saying
Yeah, great.
correctly. So what I'm hearing and from my experience too is that the exiles are these core wounding pieces that basically every single person has at some
Yes.
level, which is I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. There's shame, which is to me one of the most horrible feelings to
Yeah.
work through. um fear of abandonment, all these like core wounding things
Yeah.
that we all hold, and then they're so fragile and they're so precious that we have all these other coping mechanisms that try to push them down anytime they feel like they're getting attacked. And so some of
Mhm.
those come out as in like what I talked about, like functional societal functional ways of pushing them down, and then there's the dysfunctional ways of pushing them down. But either
Yeah,
way, we're trying to push this down so we don't have to look at it.
exactly.
And then there's not and that's where the problem is that we're seeing that like something is bad or
Yeah.
something's broken or something's fundamentally wrong, and IFS allows us to see that those underlying core wounding things inherently almost everybody's carrying some level of that around,
Mm.
and that these patterns of pushing it down and repressing are an effort to help us, but that's not super helpful. So it's looking at
Mhm.
all of them in a different frame that is in accepting all of them.
Yeah.
And it's super easy to say,
Yes, right.
but not really easy to like do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's like that old saying, what came to mind is like, if you're mad at your anger, then you have two angers, right? It's just anger on top of anger on top of anger, right? When we have this urge to shut things down or, not feel a thing, there's just more in there, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, IFS is like, all of you matter. All of our parts are lovely and interesting and have their own gifts and
Mm.
qualities to share in the world. And all of the ways that they're trying to protect us is there for a good reason. And it's really welcoming all of our parts. But in doing that, it allows us to then be with the pain that's underneath it all instead of
Yeah.
like shutting it down. But we're not like telling these parts to go away. It's more like leaning in. Tell me more about you. Who are you?
Yeah,
You
and I think
know?
that's a problem for a lot of us is we have a part and we hate it. So
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I know I get angry and then I get triggered and then I hate it and then I hate myself
Yes.
for having the anger and then it's if we could reframe it, the anger is trying to protect us,
Yes.
then there's almost this acceptance of the anger and then it diffuses it
Exactly.
in a way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Exactly.
really curious about shame because I think for me, my experience of working with other people and then also working with myself is that shame is one of the hardest
Mm-hmm.
um, feelings and emotions to move through. And so I'm thinking about, I wonder if we could use this as an example of someone that's been sexually abused at a really young age. And so in those cases, there's always some level of shame or some level of self blame, even though our
Yeah.
logical mind knows that that's absolutely crazy, right? Because we were too young and we didn't have there's so many reasons why that doesn't work, but we still hold that maladaptive thought process,
Yeah.
even though our logical mind's like that doesn't make sense. And so with those kinds of really deep entrenched from early childhood, maybe before we were even really verbal, how do
Mm-hmm.
we move through shame? I think shame's such a big one.
It really is. Yeah. What's coming up for me is just thinking about complex trauma and early childhood stuff. Like the reason that becomes traumatic and a shame response builds up inside is because there was not enough of this like co-regulation and safe like external parent or caregiver to be there for us in the pain, right? To be
Mm-hmm.
there with us, help us through it, protect us, teach us that that was not your fault, that should have never happened to you, right? For whatever reason there wasn't enough of that. And so all that a kid can do is internalize that and take that inside. And that's where the shame comes from. Like, there's something wrong with me
Mm-hmm.
because this happened to
Well,
me,
because we
right?
can't wrap our head around the fact that the people
Yes,
that are supposed to protect us and love us and our caregivers, the concept that they could actually do something to harm us isn't
right.
even like that would even be more maladaptive, right? And so we have to like
Exactly.
twist our sense of reality in a way that we can understand it because that's so far from understanding.
Exactly. Because we are hardwired as humans, as babies, to have that like attachment, right? And we're completely dependent on that. And so when that goes awry, it wrecks us inside. And so that's where I see shame coming in. There wasn't this external enough, I should say enough. There's no perfect attachment
Mm-hmm.
situation, right? But there wasn't enough. And there was too much of whatever bad thing was happening. There's too much bad and not enough good
Mm-hmm.
happening for that little one to process it. And so with IFS, what happens is our self energy
Mm-hmm.
can be there for those little ones in a way that they did not get back during that time. And so, literally, that relationship with self and parts, that witnessing that happens, that's like, I'm here now and I'm here with you. That is where the healing comes and the shame releases. And IFS has a whole process of actually releasing, they call them burdens.
Yeah.
So releasing the pain. Anyway,
But
yeah,
but there's like, that's not an easy thing to do. Some people
no,
don't even have the ability to connect with self. And when they do, they don't like that part. They don't like themselves and they can't access the parts that they like. So I'm imagining that this is a slow
it
process to
is.
develop the relationship with self and to even be able to see it and identify it. Because I think in that circumstance, with sexual abuse being so young, then there's this disassociation from self.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm imagining it takes some time to reconnect.
Yes, exactly. And what can happen in those situations like sexual abuse or severe, neglect, when there's just so much stuff that happens when we're little, um, it gets to a place where these protective parts are like self energy is not safe. You had so much self energy when you were hurt. Kids,
Mm.
babies, animals, also, I think, um, we're like almost pure self energy, just
Mm-hmm.
that like awe and wonder and openness and play and creativity, like all of that goodness. That's all self energy. And when we're hurt, when we're open like that, then we like shut it down. And when you've had so much of that pain, these protective parts get more and more like fragmented. It's like more and more fragmented parts of self that it's like self energy is not actually safe. And then they start to really reject even that feeling of self energy. Self energy is still in there though, but yeah, it takes a while for people to build up the safety to even be with self energy. Um,
So
yeah.
how do you do that? Or what are some tips for people to find a path towards beginning to develop that relationship with self?
Yeah. So for me, um, I go, and this is a little bit different than what the IFS Institute would say or teach. Um, but my way in is through nervous system regulation and
Mm-hmm.
actually teaching my clients and teaching therapists to help their clients do this. When we can access like our window of tolerance, our regulated nervous system state, our ventral vagal circuit, any polyvagal people out there, if we can access that, we are also accessing self energy. It's like a way in.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can't be connected to self energy if you don't have some access to ventral. It's like they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Many trainers in the IFS world, especially top trainers, will say that self energy is more than a regulated nervous system and it has more of like a kind of spiritual meaning behind it. I think that's great for anyone who wants to see it that way, but it doesn't have to be seen as a spiritual concept. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, a tangible way to teach people this and to like start a path to feeling self energy is teaching about the regulated nervous system and just like different nervous system states and different things that you can do to help access central.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then whenever that client or that person's ready to learn more about IFS, you can drop a little psycho ed about that self energy. When you are, outside and seeing this flower and a butterfly lands on it, and it's just like a moment of awe. That's self
Mm-hmm.
energy. You're regulated in your nervous system, even if it's like a micro moment. Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one of my like ways in.
Yeah, so it sounds like teaching mindfulness, meditation, connecting with self, breathing exercises, even journaling,
Yes,
being out in nature and being aware. I think that's something that they do in EMDR too, is you make sure that somebody can self-regulate before going deep so
yep,
that they can learn how to support themselves.
yep,
Yeah.
mhm,
And that's so important when anybody's doing deep work with any modality and any therapist,
exactly.
especially when you're going into trauma, is that it's really important that you are able to self regulate, and that you have support outside of yourself if you need it too.
Yes, exactly. And just to add here too, the IFS, if I were an IFS trainer, like a top trainer, I would say that the client feels self energy through the self energy of the therapist. And so there's a concept in IFS that the self of the therapist really, really matters it matters in general, but especially when clients have little to no access to their own self energy. So it's the therapist being aware of their own parts, right? And doing their own work around parts of self and having more access to their own self energy and then extending that to the client. So there is an external relational component
Mm-hmm.
that I think can be overlooked a bit in IFS because it's all about internal, but there's an emphasis on like therapist self energy to client. And then when the client can feel that compassion, openness, curiosity, complete welcome, when they feel that from the therapist, the client can start to feel that inside of them. I think that's lovely, but it takes a long time. It's important, but it takes a long time. I think there are other interventions that can help people build that access to self energy. But I wanted to name that.
I mean, what I'm hearing you saying is like the therapist needs to be a clear channel without a million projections. And if there are a million projections, at least they're aware of them.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I think is really, so this is the realization I've come to lately, is that there's all this stuff that we learn in school in our master's program and whatever, like social work, licensed counselor, whatever. There's all this book knowledge and there's all of this theory that we learn. And then I think we naturally, if we're attracted to this field, we're probably pretty good at being empathetic, compassionate, understanding, good listeners, just basic things. But until somebody has gone to the depths of hell through working through their own trauma and gone there, felt it, done their work, and then popped out the other end with clarity and insight, there's no way that therapist is going to be, I mean, yes, they can be good and they can reflect back and they can be helpful. But when you're working with trauma, then you need to find a therapist that has gone through all of that and come out on the other side and that can relate to what it is that you're going through. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that because I think it's so important and it's not something that you learn in school. It's not book knowledge. And honestly, I don't think there's a lot of master's programs that are focusing enough on trauma. They could do a whole semester on trauma and not one class is not enough. Like trauma is, to me, there should be a whole master's on trauma.
Oh, totally. I completely agree. I didn't really learn about any of that until after grad school, after internships. But I completely agree with you about what you're saying about the therapist needing to do their own work. And for me, I really embrace that in a not like shaming way of like therapists, we are all human. We've all been through some shit. Okay. And we need space for us. And I do believe that you can only go as far with someone else as far as you've gone yourself, right? So if you've been more surface level as a therapist for your own work, that's where you're at, then that's where you can help your clients. And I don't mean that in like, again, not in a shaming way, but we can only go as far as someone else as we've gone with ourselves. And I mean, my whole business is focused around therapists doing their own work. It's essential. It's essential for us to sustain in this field, but also to actually walk alongside our clients and help them go to those depths. They can't do that with us if we haven't done it with ourselves.
Yeah. And there is about the sustaining piece because, you know, and I say this all the time, but like we're never done.
No.
And so it's like there's cycles. And so when those cycles come up, it's like having the skills and the ability to be able to look at them and move through them and navigate them because it's never ending, the process of healing.
There's more and more layers. Parts of me hate that, by the way.
Yeah.
I want to like arrive, but we don't ever arrive fully.
And so I think here's the thing. There's therapists and then there's there's the rest of the world, and we're
Yeah.
all the same.
Yes.
Everybody's got trauma. I
Yes.
just don't know anybody that doesn't. And it could be a small trauma or it could be a big trauma, but we all have trauma. But it is the responsibility of the therapist serving other people to have gone through that and work through that in a healthy way so that they can support others. Yeah, I just think that there's like a little bit of an added responsibility with supporting others in our profession.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And so what does it look like to have a more self-led life? So if we're living by self and we've worked through, most of our stuff, or at least some of our stuff, what does that look like?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. So in some IFS context and content and things that people see out there, it can feel as though self energy is like better or more important or the ultimate goal over parts energy. And so I love to make a distinction that parts energy is just as important as self energy. And my parts like to joke, self energy is overrated. But I'm mostly kidding. They're both important. And for me, what a self-led life looks like is embracing all parts of self, actually being okay with all of our parts, and not doing like a spiritual bypassing type of thing of like, I'm just, pure self energy all the time. If we were pure self energy, we'd be just like in a meditative state. Like
Yeah.
self energy is a state of being, right? So we need all of it, and it's the ability to be with our own parts. That's a self-led life for me, and really being aware of our own parts when we get activated or triggered in relationships with others. It happens all the time. Being able to speak for parts, like saying, a part of me is feeling really hurt by what you just said. Like really, it like takes
acknowledge it, giving them a voice.
Yes, it's like one step beyond an I statement, right? Therapists love I statements. It's like a step beyond. It's like speaking for parts. Part of me feels this way. Part of me feels this, and like really having that awareness.
Yeah, there's an honoring in that instead of a pushing away.
Exactly. Yeah, and I learned from one of my IFS trainers. She kept saying this all of the time, and like finally, probably like 2 years in, it clicked. It takes a minute for things to settle for me, but she was like, the best way to build access to self energy is to be with your parts. And it didn't click for me for a minute, probably because it seems so simple, but truly, like, turn towards, be with your own parts, like really get to know these parts in a real, genuine, meaningful way. Like that is a self-led life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes me think of meditation, where a lot of people will start meditating and all these thoughts are coming in and they start hating the thoughts and they want to get rid of them, but they're like part of the meditation.
Yes.
And then we get really frustrated and really angry that these thoughts are coming in, but the thoughts are natural. Like they're supposed to flow in and out and in and out and in and out. And it's just about witnessing that flow versus trying to push it away. And the more we push it away, then the harder it is, that process. And it sounds similar with IFS too, is like there's all these different parts. And if we can give them a voice and we can look at them and we can understand them and have compassion for them versus I hate this part and I want to get rid of it, which is super common. I've been there a million times where I'm like,
me too.
I hate this about myself, and but if we can give it a voice and compassion, then it seems like they get like a little quieter.
Yes, exactly. They do. Yeah, and that description about meditation, when people, and I've been there too, when people get it, when it finally shifts for them, where they're like, oh, I can just like let the thoughts go by, right? That like peace, that perspective, that shift, that is self energy. And those thoughts floating by are parts. So parts can communicate with us in many different ways. Thoughts is one way that parts show up.
Yeah.
But yeah, since you said that example, I wanted to highlight that. That is that is self energy once we can get into that like perspective of, oh, this is okay. These thoughts can be here.
Yeah. And I feel like we all, most of us really hate being triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And then that whenever we get triggered, there's such a gem in there about
Yeah.
let's take a minute to self reflect and like, what is this about and explore it more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think triggers are always really giant opportunities for growth and expansion.
Mm-hmm. I agree. In the IFS world, they call those trailheads,
Okay.
which I really like because it's like a journey that you can go on. So yeah, anytime that you find yourself triggered or activated, that is a part. And if you can turn toward that part and be like, hey, I noticed you're having big feelings about this. Tell me more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, so much can come from that. So much like depth and realization and healing can come just turning toward your heart who's triggered.
I mean, I guess the same would go for the maladaptive behaviors where we're eating too much, we're drinking too much, we're smoking too much, we're being on social media too much, like anything like those numbing out,
Mm-hmm.
disassociating behaviors. Maybe we're laying in bed, we're sleeping too much, like something like that. And then that's an
Yeah,
opportunity to look at what is being avoided. I think that's a little trickier to
exactly.
do.
It is trickier, and from an IFS perspective, the reason why is the if that activity is present, the person's already been flooded with so much pain. And so
Mm,
it's already like, oh, I don't want to feel this. So that's why these parts are here, shutting it down. So it is harder. It is harder to do, but you certainly can do it.
mm-hmm.
Um, and that is an opportunity to, get to know that part of you and then maybe build up some safety inside to be with some of that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about people that are skeptical about parts work and they feel like you're just playing and pretending,
Yes.
or if it's just overly abstract for them and they can't grab onto it? How do you? And I know you're working with therapists, so they're already open to that when they're coming to you. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that you've heard those criticisms before.
Oh, for sure. And they existed inside of me. I still have a skeptic part who is active. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I was practicing with a lot of clients before I started specializing with therapists. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, for me, um, I see it in a couple different ways. If they don't like the concept of parts or they just can't connect with it, then that is likely a part of them.
Yeah.
And if I can just lean in with my own curiosity and say, tell me more. Like I'm talking to the part directly from my self energy.
Mm,
Tell me more about why you hate this concept of parts, and why it, bothers you. Just, really being curious about it. So then I hear more from that part of what they don't like. This feels silly. This feels made up. This feels like woo woo stuff.
hmm.
How is this going to help me? So I say, oh, it sounds like anytime something might feel silly or playful, that feels uncomfortable. Is that
Hmm.
right? So then you can like lean in a little bit more about like what is it for that person.
Yeah.
They still may not want to do IFS. It's totally fine. I'm gonna respect that. And we just won't do IFS. I still have a framework of parts. I
Hmm.
can't separate that, but we don't have to do that as the intervention. Um, but I lean in and just get curious. And if there is some openness that comes from that dialogue, like maybe they just need a little bit more psychoed. Maybe it's a part of them that wants to understand the research or more of the concepts behind it. Then that could be a way in to help that part feel like, oh, okay, there's some research to back this up. This is okay.
Yeah.
Or I like to say parts are like you don't have to relate to them as like little beings. I do. I relate to them as like little beings.
Hmm.
But you can think of parts as like they communicate with us through thoughts, emotions, body sensations, images, dreams, memories. It's all the stuff in our bundle of neurons in our brain and the nerves in our body, right? That you can think of it like that in a more like physical, tangible way. It's
Yeah.
the stuff that our thoughts are made of. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the person and what their hesitation is about it, and that there could be some working with that.
Yeah. Right. That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
And then when you and I were talking before, we talked a little bit about how IFS has a spiritual element to it. And I know my audience is going to be curious about that. And so I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yeah. So, and I really do say not everyone has to think of it this way, and but for people who are open to it, people can think of self energy as this like shared collective energy that we are all like swimming in, that we all have access to, and it's more than a regulated nervous system, or more than just us. It's this like shared felt sense, the shared like existence of being human. So you can think of it in that like broad, expansive way, and you can do some stuff within the IFS model where you are connecting with ancestors. There's like ways built into the like steps in the flow of the IFS model, where you get to a place of releasing burdens. So the burdens are the pain, the traumas, the negative core beliefs, all the stuff that we hold from these experiences. You can get to a point, it's called unburdening, where you ask the part if they want to release those burdens into the elements, essentially. Which, this sounds so woo-woo. My skeptical part is always so like, this is ridiculous.
Yep.
But it's like, find these burdens in or around your body and release them into air, water, earth, fire, the universe, wherever. And so in that way, this feels, for me, feels really spiritual and very sacred when we get to that place. And literally every time the parts find it, and it's usually, I just had one the other day in my own system. It was like these little jagged like rocks that were all over my body, like little daggers. And the part like just like found all of that, took it out. And so this is where the ancestors come in. You can do a legacy unburdening where you just like send all of that back to your ancestors who passed that down to you. And you invite them in, the ones that you feel safe with, of course, right? I always am paying attention to like spiritual protection and making sure that parts and people consent. Right? There could be reasons why certain ancestors maybe we don't want to invite in, but whoever's there for the higher good to help the healing of this person and their lineage, you can invite them in and send that legacy burden back to the source of where it started.
It doesn't belong to me.
Exactly. And I'll just share a little bit of personal, not a ton. Mine was related to racism. I like grew up in the deep South, in the panhandle of Florida. And so some stuff showed up in that work of my own parts, and we just handed a bunch of stuff back, which was really lovely.
Who did you send it back to?
It was on my mom's side. My several ancestors. So there's more before them, but my mother's father and my mother's grandmother on her dad's side, and they showed up actually, surprisingly, and they took a lot of it back. And then you can ask for a legacy gift, like wisdom, insight, and whatever, that they can send back down after the burden has been released. And so it's not all the bad stuff. There's also good stuff.
What did you ask for?
I think it can be really dreamlike when you're doing this work. So it was like light. It was like light and love. That was sent back. And it essentially, fills up the spaces that were left in your body of all that stuff that was released, which was so lovely.
I mean, I would love to talk about epigenetics because as
Yeah.
woo as this does sound, right? I think you and I are similar where we're like super grounded in science and reality. And then there's a
Yes.
piece of us that's spiritual. And there is science to back up the epigenetics piece. And so
Yes.
I'd love to talk a little bit about that because things that our ancestors go through, or when we're born, if our parents are going through something, it does get passed down through us, and it is scientifically proven. And so what can you share about this?
Yeah, and I know less about the actual stuff with epigenetics, but what I know about it is the stuff that people have experienced in the past that was not healed, was not attended to, was not processed in a way to be, I don't have to hold on to this anymore, right? If any of that stuff was still stuck there, and a lot of it was because we have more access to healing now than our ancestors did before, right? I believe most people are doing the best they can, right, with what they have.
Yeah.
And each generation is doing a little bit better to not like fuck up the further generation.
Yeah.
At least that's my hope.
Yeah. Because when you know better, you can do
Exactly, you
better.
do better. So we know like that stuff that doesn't get attended to, our body changes at or the level of our DNA. There's these little codes that switch given for different genes, given what environmental circumstance is happening, that says we need to turn this gene on or off. And that's where from that like more science place, they have seen in research, I've seen stuff related to Holocaust survivors of different genes that were changed and sent down through the DNA, right? So our environment and the experiences that we go through matters. It's not like nature versus nurture anymore. It's both, right? It's nature and nurture together. And so the DNA changes, and then when you do have children, you're passing that DNA on, and then down and down the line. So, I mean, yeah, that's as much as I can say about that.
Well, which is why it's so important to do our own work so that we can stop generational trauma, that we can stop it and quit this continuation of passing it down through the next generation. So we're doing it for like our next generation.
Yeah. And for me, just speaking for myself, that feels so freaking empowering for me. I am a mom now. I do have 3 little children, and did a lot of my own work before that, and I'm obviously am forever doing work, but that feels so empowering as a mother to be one of these like cycle breakers, with all the shit that's been passed down through both of my sides of the family. And I love it. It makes me feel really strong and like a badass.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. It's much easier to take the easy path of avoidance and disassociation and numbing out. And if you can move through that pain and that discomfort, the gift that's on the other end is so great, and it's so worth it. It's so worth it. And it's so hard.
Yes, it is. It is so hard.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about, you were saying that right now they're researching IFS. The IFS world is researching plant medicine, MDMA, psychedelics. I'm really curious about that and the link between the two.
Yeah. And the IFS Institute, the website, they have like a section on there with all their research, which I would really encourage people to look at. And they are really interested in psychedelics and IFS right now. That's where a lot of the focus is on. And from my understanding as a like consultant, and I don't have a ton of lived experience with this, and which is kind of out of my comfort zone when I don't have the lived felt sense. But just from what I understand from people is different plant medicines are helping our protective parts to feel safe enough to give space for self energy to come forward. And so much healing happens when there's enough safety for that self energy to be there. So then you can actually be with these parts carrying the pain and help them release it in a much faster way. And I hesitate to say faster because in IFS, it really is meant to be slow.
Yeah.
Slow is fast in IFS.
Mm-hmm.
And you always check with the protective system before you go to any pain underneath, and you explicitly ask for permission. So I really want to highlight that. But what they're finding with different medicines is these protective parts feel safe because there's more access to self energy through the medicine, and then paves the way for just like deep work to happen,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I just think, is really incredible.
Well, and I also think that it helps uncover unconscious material. And I feel for the most part, I don't think in every circumstance, but for the most part, that material is emerging because it's ready to be looked at that
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
right? Because if it wasn't ready, we kind of shove it down. And so I see people going through plant medicine journeys, and they're going like a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, and then finally this like huge thing appears. It's the mother wound or whatever. It's the
Yes.
this is the golden nugget of whatever needs to be healed, and I feel like it doesn't appear until it's ready.
Yeah.
um and so that's kind of but I have known people where it didn't feel as if it was ready to come up yet. They
Mhm.
didn't feel ready and prepared for it. So I think, plant medicine on its own really needs to be paired with a therapist, a sitter, integration,
Yeah.
therapeutic services, support, all of that. I think
Mhm.
using it recreationally is one thing, using it therapeutically is another thing,
Mhm.
and really trusting who you're with and the sources, and making sure you have support afterwards, because it can
Yeah.
turn some big old rocks. It can
Oh,
flip them over.
totally. Yes, and I've heard all a variety of experiences that people have had as well. And I agree with you. I think that's where the like gentleness and intentionality and slowness of IFS can really be a great pair with this work, because you're checking in with the protective system regularly. And so you literally say things like, "Is check inside and see if it's okay to work with this perfectionist part today."
Mm-hmm.
So that's built into the model, is asking permission and always making space for the protective system to speak up when they have any concerns. And so I think that is a really good fit with powerful plant medicine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is it's client led, it's client centered, it's slow, it's supportive, and it's nurturing in its process. There's nothing forced. The therapist isn't forcing a direction. It's very client led and gentle.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to add that we haven't touched on?
Ooh. Um, yes. um, I so again, I love IFS. I love the like emphasis on the inner healer and self energy, all of that. But sometimes I think there can be something missing about the power, the like essential need for safe external relationships, and the power of that like attachment and attunement and witnessing that we receive outside of ourselves. And I get to this like debate in my head and with any IFS people who want to geek out with me about like, how do we know what self energy feels like, that like inner caregiver, if we have not received that outside of us,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? Or we have little moments,
Yeah.
like we probably have some, but not a lot, right? So it's like, how do we know what that feels like? And IFS sometimes can be overemphasizing that self energy.
Yeah.
And really, as far as they go, is leaning in on the self energy of the therapist, which I appreciate that. That's relational externally. But I think there's more that we can do with that. Like, I think of the externalization of self energy and thinking about, like in EMDR, there's a way to help build up resources for people, like a
Mm-hmm.
team of allies or safe, calm place or whatever.
Yeah.
There are ways to build up that like felt sense of safety in external relationships. Um, that if we do that, then we can help to access that inner self energy a bit
Mm-hmm.
more. And so
Yeah.
that's something I just care about. We haven't talked about that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I would love for you to share before we wrap it up too, how people can find a well-trained IFS therapist, because the IFS Institute has incredible training. There's trainings through there. And now there's a lot of people saying they're IFS informed. And so I
Yeah.
want you to share the difference between somebody that's IFS informed versus somebody that's actually been through the IFS Institute and has completed their, I think they have 3 levels, but at least like level 1.
Yes. This is super important to me. So um if you can get into a level 1 IFS Institute training, I highly recommend it. It's really, really phenomenal. You do a lot of deep work on your own self, your own system, which is essential to this model. And I think just in general, it's important. But it's a huge time commitment. It's like 90 CEs, huge time commitment and financial commitment. And there historically have been a lot of barriers to access to get level 1 trained. And especially after COVID, there's a huge like surge in people wanting to be trained. And the IFS Institute really has not been able to keep up with demand.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing better. But in general, I am really like passionate about helping therapists to learn IFS in any accessible way that they can. But if you aren't trained through the IFS Institute, you cannot say that you're IFS trained. That's
Yeah.
literally the only way to get actually trained. Um, Other than that, it's IFS informed. And IFS informed, there's no regulation around that. Anyone could say they're IFS informed if they like read a book.
Yeah.
So there is no definition to what IFS informed is.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is um, get consultation, get your own work, like hire an IFS therapist, and do that yourself and continue to get support. And if you really are feeling that you can do some of this work, then yes, say that you're IFS informed. Um, and I'm also a bit of a disruptor. And so again, I don't know. You got to feel it out, work with people that you trust. There's not a whole lot you can do about if they're IFS informed or not. You don't really know how much that means. But if they're level 1 trained, you can find that on the IFS website. There's a whole directory
Yeah.
of level 1 IFS trained people. And level 1 is solid. It is a lot of learning. So you don't need someone who is level 2 or IFS certified necessarily. Um, but level 1 trained is really solid.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
And how can people reach you? What are some of the offerings? Of course, I'm going to put all this in the show notes and put those links there, but I'd love for you to say a little bit more about
Yeah.
what you have to offer.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so my whole practice is focused around supporting therapists. So I have a variety of different services, including IFS consultation. I have IFS consultation groups for people specifically who have not been able to be level 1 trained because there's such a need for people to learn. So I have those groups. I have IFS groups for people who have been IFS trained and want to be certified. So I do that. I help people get certified. I also have experiential groups for therapists that I call Speak for Parts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for any therapist who is just like wanting to get to know their part and are just like open to parts work. You don't have to have any IFS background.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lovely like process group for therapists.
Yeah.
Which is really like very experiential, not consultation. So a variety of those. And then I'm also an EMDR consultant and created an IFS informed EMDR certification package. That's a year-long program that is all about the integration of these two. And by the end of it, you're EMDRIA certified, not IFS certified because you got to, go
Yeah.
through their stuff, but the integration of that work as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing part of your day with us. And I really appreciate everything that you have to offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nickyyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.